What if the golden tiger was never something you paint, but something that only appears when you let the process take control? The secret of the golden tiger casting method does not begin with metal or mold, nor with fire or hand, but with a way of seeing that dissolves the boundary between intention and accident, because those who claim to know it in literal terms inevitably miss its deeper function, which is to orchestrate a dialogue between chaos and precision until neither can be distinguished from the other. And so the golden tiger itself, never a literal animal, never merely an ornament, emerges as a state of alignment where force, timing, and restraint converge in a form that appears inevitable only after it exists, as though it had always been waiting beneath the surface of possibility. And the practitioner, if they can be called that, must first abandon the urge to dominate the material and instead cultivate a listening posture toward it, because the method insists that bronze or gold or any molten substance carries within it a memory of pressure, of geological patience, of heat cycles beyond human comprehension. And if approached too aggressively, it resists not by refusal but by distortion, subtle at first, then catastrophic. Which is why early attempts at the golden tiger casting often yield shapes that resemble neither tiger nor abstraction, but a confused compromise. A reminder that intention without surrender produces only noise. And so the discipline evolves not by adding techniques, but by removing interference, by refining perception until the caster can sense when heat becomes language, when viscosity becomes rhythm, when the mold itself is no longer a passive container, but an active participant shaping the outcome in ways that cannot be fully predicted or controlled. And this is where the metaphor of the tiger begins to reveal itself. Because the tiger in this method is not a creature to be represented, but a principle to be embodied. Silent power, precise movement, and the paradox of tension held within stillness. And so the casting process mirrors a hunt that never quite occurs, a poised moment stretched across time, where action is always imminent but never rushed, and each decision, when to pour, when to wait, when to intervene, when to do nothing, carries weight not because it determines the final form directly, but because it shifts the balance of forces that will determine it indirectly. And the golden aspect, often misunderstood as referring simply to material value, instead points to a quality of illumination, a moment when the interplay of variables becomes visible as a coherent whole, when the caster perceives not separate steps but a continuous unfolding. And in that moment, the method ceases to feel like a method at all and becomes an experience of participation in something larger, something that cannot be reduced to instructions or replicated through imitation, because its essence lies in responsiveness rather than repetition. And yet, paradoxically, it requires rigorous repetition to reach the point where responsiveness becomes possible. A long apprenticeship of failures that are not truly failures but calibrations of sensitivity, each flawed casting teaching the practitioner something about imbalance, about excess heat or insufficient patience, about the consequences of forcing alignment rather than allowing it to emerge. And over time, these lessons accumulate not as explicit knowledge, but as a kind of embodied intuition, a quiet confidence that guides the hand without needing to articulate itself. And this is why those who seek to document the golden tiger casting method often find themselves writing in circles, using metaphors and contradictions. Because the process resists linear explanation, it must be approached obliquely, like the tiger itself, never directly confronted but gradually understood through observation and attunement, and even then it remains elusive, always one step beyond complete comprehension, which is precisely what keeps it alive, because a fully codified method would cease to evolve, would become static, predictable, devoid of the very tension that gives rise to its most compelling outcomes. And so the secret, if it can be called that, is not a hidden step or a guarded formula but a shift in orientation. A willingness to engage with uncertainty as a collaborator rather than an obstacle, to recognize that control is not the goal but a tool to be used sparingly, strategically, and then relinquished at the right moment. And this relinquishment is perhaps the most difficult aspect to master, because it requires trust not only in the material and the process but in one's own preparation. In the countless hours of practice that have built the capacity to respond effectively when control is no longer possible. And it is here that many practitioners falter, clinging too tightly to their plans, unable to let go. And as a result, their castings, though technically competent, lack the vitality that characterizes a true golden tiger piece, which always contains an element of surprise, a detail or a flow that could not have been designed in advance but feels entirely appropriate once it appears. As though the piece itself had a say in its own creation, and in a sense it does, because the method invites the emergence of properties that lie beyond deliberate design, properties that arise from the interaction of variables too complex to fully map, and by creating conditions in which these interactions can occur productively, the caster becomes less of a creator and more of a facilitator, guiding the process without dictating it, shaping the environment in which the form can find itself. And this distinction, subtle but profound, transforms not only the outcome but the experience of making, turning what might otherwise be a technical procedure into a kind of meditation, and abhyas, use of attention and patience, where each moment demands presence and each action carries consequence. And over time, this practice extends beyond the workshop, influencing how the practitioner engages with other aspects of life, fostering a sensitivity to timing, to balance, to the interplay of effort and ease. And so the golden tiger casting method, while rooted in a specific craft, becomes a broader philosophy, a way of navigating complexity without reducing it, of acting decisively without closing off possibility. And this is why its teachings, though difficult to articulate, continue to resonate across generations, passed not through manuals but through demonstration, through the shared experience of working alongside someone who has internalized its principles. Watching how they move, how they wait, how they respond to unexpected shifts without panic, how they seem to anticipate changes not by predicting them but by remaining open to them. And in this transmission, the essence of the method is preserved not as fixed knowledge but as a living practice, adaptable to new materials, new contexts, new interpretations, and yet always anchored in the same core insight. That creation at its most powerful arises from a dynamic balance between intention and surrender, between structure and fluidity, between the known and the unknowable. And the golden tiger, in all its abstract ambiguity, stands as a symbol of that balance, a reminder that true mastery lies not in eliminating uncertainty, but in dancing with it, not in imposing order but in discovering it as it emerges, shimmering briefly in the molten interplay before solidifying into form, leaving behind a trace of something that can be seen, touched, and contemplated, but never fully explained.